Hello, everybody. I'm Shelley of Complex Connections, and I want to make this short video to help you understand why your young person may be experiencing big emotions at this time of year, why things maybe are not going according to your expectations or the plan that you had, also how you can go about supporting them. And I want to encourage you through this video to create Christmas your way. So do things that work for your family. So I hope by the end of it, you'll have a little toolbox of things that you can use, but also, most importantly, a greater understanding of why your child may be struggling and what you can do to help. So we all have 8 senses, but today we're going to concentrate on the most well-known five, which is sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. We are constantly receiving input through those senses, the majority of which are not even conscious of. This input is coming into us from our environment constantly. And like I say, we only actually consciously register a very small proportion of those. It's really important that we get this information because it helps us to make sense of what's going on around us, to organize ourselves in the space, to regulate ourselves. So it's an absolutely crucial element. Now, sometimes with the sensory processing, a young person who has ADHD or an autistic brain may be hypersensitive, which means that they can react more strongly to the sensory information than, say, a neurotypical child. Um, they may they may be particularly hypersensitive in one area. So, for instance, their sight may be really sensitive and they can't take any kind of bright light, and they may not struggle with one of their other senses. Everybody has a unique sensory profile, every human being, but it's just that when you have a neurodivergent brain, there is often more hypersensitivity in one of those areas. The signals in a neurodivergent brain can become confused as well. So the senses can overlap, and there can be some kind of what we may consider disorganization there. It's just these sensory differences that occur. Also, for a neurodivergent brain, we know that all of our brains have the primary function of keeping us safe. They want us to survive, they want us to stay safe. So, for a neurodivergent brain, that safety often comes from predictability, certainty, familiarity, all of those kind of things. And Christmas and all the festivities that go with it are anything but predictable and familiar. And so this is where that sense of threat can come in. In our brain, we have the amygdala, which is in the deep part of our brain, above the brain stem, and that is the emotion center of the brain. And then we have the frontal lobe, which is right at the front of our head, and that is where all our logical thinking and reasoning and organization and all of those things take place. The best explanation that I've found for how the amygdala and the frontal lobe can become disconnected when emotion runs high is through the explanation of the guard dog and the wise owl. So, if we think of the amygdala as the guard dog, it is always on alert, it is looking for danger, it is trying to make sense of what is safe and predictable. Whereas the wise owl is the one that is more logical, more quiet, more thoughtful. But when emotions do run high, when that amygdala senses danger and that guard dog comes out barking and growling and being really vicious, obviously the wise owl flies away. So our amygdala hijacks our brain in that it disconnects from the logical thinking. So you may see behavior that is inappropriate in our eyes. It may be too big for what you think the situation requires. It may be completely opposite to what you would expect. So that is because the emotion part of the brain is dominating and logical thinking has gone out the window. What we may see in those situations is we may see our young person nervous system tipped into a stress response. So they may exhibit fight, flight, or freeze responses. Fight would be that aggression, the fighting, the shouting, swearing, hitting, kicking, throwing things. Flight is more running away, avoiding, hiding under the table, trying to get away from whatever it is or out of the situation that's making them feel threatened. And freeze is when they become really lethargic, disconnected. They don't want to have a conversation. They won't answer your questions. They just want to hide under the duvet. So those are the three stress responses that you may well be seeing in your young person's behavior at the moment around this time. Remember as well that what one brain thinks is unsafe and threatening may be completely different to what another brain perceives as that. Our brains predict what may happen in a situation based on our previous experience, but also in a neurodivergent brain, with it being hypersensitive, with it perhaps having had more experience of negative reactions and responses, may constantly be on alert. So it never is completely dysregulated, and it can respond to things very quickly in a very kind of extreme way. So, how can we help our young person? First of all, we can get curious, and curiosity means letting go of expectations, assumptions, judgments, looking at things with fresh eyes, having a new perspective on them. So, being curious is really asking questions, observing, putting your detective hat on basically, and working out what might be going on for your child. If they're old enough, you can ask them, tell them, ask them, how do they feel? Where do they feel it? What's making them feel uncomfortable? Is there something you can do to help? With a really young child, you're going to have to make those observations and make that judgment yourself about what's hindering them. But you can still communicate with them in a really compassionate way. So even if they can't tell you what's upset them, you will be able to speak to them in a calm and reassuring way. Tell them that they're safe, tell them that it's okay, that you're going to help them, and that should begin to regulate their nervous system. And that's called co-regulation. Now, in order to be able to co-regulate, we have to be regulated first and foremost, because we need to bring our calm nervous system to our young person's dysregulation. If we are dysregulated, if we become really anxious and we start, pardon me, shouting, that is only going to increase their dysregulation. In order for us to be regulated, we need to look after ourselves at this time of year. And I know how difficult that is, whether you've got a long to-do list, you're still working, you're still trying to keep things going, you're trying to organize and please everybody. It can be really difficult for you to feel regulated. Try to maintain that regulation. If you need to, take a couple of minutes if your child is becoming dysregulated to breathe. Do something that regulates your own nervous system first before you step into that situation and help them. And most importantly, maintain connection. Put connection as the most important factor. Don't prioritize other things above that connection with your child. And I know it can be really difficult when you're trying to connect with relatives and wider family and friends, and you're trying to keep everybody happy. That connection with your child is so, so important. The memories can be made in different ways. You can lose some of the traditions that don't work for your family. You can tweak some of them, do things differently, create things in a way that brings your family peace and happiness. It's no good trying to live up to these expectations and trying to produce something which really isn't going to work for our family. When we have happy children and settled children, it makes things so much happier and easier for us. So really important to work out what works for them, talk to them about it, get them to communicate with you, and then you can collaborate with them and work out ways that you can do things. If they feel that their voice is being listened to, they are being seen and understood, they are far more likely to be able to cooperate, and they will have a much kind of more, a much bigger ability to possibly compromise on certain things or have more tolerance for certain things, but they need to feel that connection. They need to know that we are listening to them and we're not disregarding how they are feeling. So if you're seeing those tears and frustration and loud voices and arguments, just know that there's lots of other families struggling with the same things. It is a tricky time of year. Be compassionate to yourself as well, but get curious, have compassionate communication with your young person, co-regulate with them and focus on connection. And I hope with all of that, you're able to have a really happy and a really peaceful Christmas in whatever way you choose to do it, in whatever way is best for your family. Take care.